How's it going, folks? Nice to see you today. My name's Dustin Cormier, and you're watching How to Rock Astrology. I'm expecting this to go for quite a long little while. Today we're going to be talking about our second chapter in the chapter about keys to transformation. This chapter is specifically about Pluto. Now, if you've been watching this series, this video is going to continue on our series. But if you want to know a bit about Pluto, if you just want to get right to the goods about Pluto without having to go through all the other videos I've done, you'll still get a lot out of this if you hang out with us and watch this video as well. You will get something out of this by doing that. So, welcome. We're going to talk about Pluto today, first in general. Then we're going to go through the meaning and implications of the transits of Pluto. And then we're going to describe the reality that is Pluto's house position. And finally, in the end, we're going to talk about aspects to Pluto. And throughout this chapter, we're going to be splitting them into little smaller episodes, trying to put a ring around the fact of Pluto being such a permeating influence, a necessary factor of final letting go, final liberation, final surrender to the inherent unconscious complexes of the past lives of the psyche. Pluto is the most important key to transformation in a lot of ways, at least archetypally, although not everybody in this incarnation is doomed or blessed to deal with Plutonian purge energies. But Pluto is the danky dank. It's the furthest karmic arbiter, the deepest, the least, the psychic agent least likely to move with a proper sense of flow and flux, but for whom, when there is flow and flux achieved in this incarnation, it is the most satisfying, the most riveting, the most liberating. Everybody deals with it a little bit, but not everybody confronts it consciously in this lifetime. We're going to talk about all this, so this is coming through the consciousness of Stephen Arroyo, who we know is a well-dedicated astrological counselor. And this book and this whole series is really fitted to try and transcribe the language from an astrologer from the counselor to the client, to the patient, so that the patient can more clearly grasp the transcendental figures that the outer planets represent. But as well, if you don't plan to ever be an astral counselor, you can take this video series as on your end as being a client to help you, your astrologer. It hopes that you have a way of understanding the transcendental language of these outer planets. And if you watch a series like this, and if you educate yourself, then you will be a much more capable vessel of taking the insights of your astrologer and applying them to your own life. And that's the other side of what this series is trying to do. So, now, we are in, like I said, we're on chapter 4 of Astrology Karma and Transformation. Each chapter includes a picture of a visual yantra or mantra. It makes total sense that Cancer would be the chapter beginner for Pluto. It's a very cool little mandala. And each of these mandalas is meant to describe something of the inherent essence of, in this case, the sign number 4. House number 4, the numerology of 4, that being Cancer. And it also makes sense that Cancer and Pluto have a certain relationship. I mean, Pluto is better known for relating with Scorpio and with the 8th house, occult sense of life beyond death and death beyond life. Pluto, I think, does deeply relate to the roots of oneself in a lot of ways. So that's why it's interesting that Cancer is the figurehead for chapter 4 in this book. Now I've done a lot of introducing. At this point, I think I'm just going to get into it. For anybody who is watching, feel free to make any comments, ask any questions. This is, of course, as usual, this is a live stream. So anybody watching now or any videos that I do, you can feel free to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them as befits the content of the conversation. Okay, so let's get into it. This is Keys to Transformation, Part 2, Pluto. This video serves as an introduction to the Pluto part of this series. And Arroyo often starts these with a sweet little quote. This is another one from Shakespeare's The Tempest, which I'm thinking about reading after reading all these. Though the seas threaten, they are merciful. I have cursed them without cause. Shakespeare, The Tempest. Just because the seas threaten, just because your ego threatens to dissolve under the plutonian pressures of mob gangster power plays against you, doesn't mean that they were always simply bad experiences happening on planet Earth. Sometimes they are divine agents at work, seeking your letting go, surrendering to the crazy energies that this planet has the potential to transmit. Now, Stephen Arroyo begins in talking about Pluto. Most astrologers agree that the planet Pluto symbolizes a dimension of life that is so complex and has such deep sources that an aura of mystery surrounds the meaning of this planet in any individual birth chart. Since its discovery, there have been many attempts to clarify the meaning of this planet. And although astrologers are able to find many different meanings useful for their particular purposes, and although many articles have been written about the influence of Pluto on mass karma and mundane events, I have not been able to find any explanation of this planet's significance for the individual human being and his psychological makeup, which I could regard as complete. It seems there's always something hidden about Pluto, something subtle and difficult to conceptualize in ordinary logical terms. Everything connected with Pluto is slightly out of the ordinary, a bit eccentric, and indicative of a realm of cosmic immensity that boggles the mind. This is true not only of the planet's function astrologically, but also the movement of the planet itself. The orbit of Pluto, like the orbits of all the other planets, is an ellipse. But Pluto's orbit is considerably more elliptical than that of any other major planet in the solar system. Sorry, folks, I just want to write something down real quick. I was getting little Uranian ideas. So sorry about that. Pluto's orbit is considerably more elliptical than any other major planet in the solar system. Whereas the orbital planets of all the other major planets lie within 7 degrees of the plane of the Earth's orbit, or the plane of the ecliptic, meaning, everything's going this way. Some of them have a bit of a vertical thing so that they're not going exactly, you'll notice that I'm going down and up, down and up, down and up. Some of them have a little bit of that, but they're mostly pretty straight on the elliptical plane. But the orbit of Pluto is inclined fully 17 degrees to that plane. So Pluto is the one that's going like down, like this thing. Like it's not just going sideways like all the other planets. Its orbit is like this, if that makes sense. The mean distance of this planet from the Sun is nearly 40 astronomical units, the astronomical unit being the mean distance of the Earth from the Sun, or roughly 93 million miles. Accordingly, a distance of 40 astronomical units amounts in round numbers to 100,000 million, 3,700,000,000 miles. The orbit of the planet is so pronouncedly elliptical, however, that its distance from the Sun varies to the extent of some basically almost 2 billion miles. The minimum distance being equal to about 3 billion miles. Yeah, or a trifle less than that of being equal to about 3 billion miles. Oh gosh, sorry. Or a trifle less than that of Neptune, and the maximum distance to approximately about 4,500,000,000 miles. It's nearly 65% greater than that of Neptune. Sorry if that was a lot of astronomical hoopla. Hope I didn't lose anybody there just with that like annoyingly astronomical language, but this is saying that the width of Pluto's orbit is actually like 65% greater than that of Neptune, which is quite significant, Neptune being the second farthest from the Sun. Like the other planets, however, Pluto does revolve around the Sun from west to east. That is, in a counterclockwise direction. Its period of revolution around the Sun is about 250 of our Earth years. Hence, a year on this planet is equal to 2.5 centuries here on Earth. Right, so a year on Pluto is equal to 2.5 centuries here on Earth. Pluto is now near the perihelion point in its orbit, or that closest to the Sun. It passed that point in the year 1989, when it was at a distance from the Sun only slightly less than that of Neptune, which is at about 3 billion miles. Pluto was then nearest to the Earth as well as the Sun, and in the most favorable position generally for observation from the Earth, which is pretty cool. It's interesting even thinking about what that cycle means. Whether maybe the people that were born around 1989 had some kind of summer solstice of Pluto, in the same way that the Earth's relationship to the Sun reaches its zenith in the summer solstice when the Earth in the northern hemisphere is closer to the Sun, absorbing more of its rays. Maybe Pluto being that close to the Sun and the Earth also has a solstice effect, bringing its strength and power. It's interesting to think about. It is an interesting circumstance that if its orbit lay in the same plane as that of the orbit of Neptune, Pluto at perihelion would be slightly within the orbit of Neptune. As a result of the high mutual inclination of the orbital planes of the two planets, however, their orbits do not intersect at any point, although at its closest approach to the Sun, Pluto is actually a bit, approximately half an astronomical unit, nearer to the Sun than is Neptune. According to Dr. Franklin of the Hayden Planetarium in New York City, Pluto moved closer to the Sun in its orbit than Neptune on December 11th, 1978, and will remain there until March 14th, 1999. Interesting, looking at it being past that now. Many astrologers have commented on this period, linking it to crucial changes in the world's cultural development. Dane Rudhyar specifically points out that this passage of Pluto closer to the Sun than Neptune has a stimulating or seeding effect at the deeper levels of collective consciousness. Very interesting. Dane Rudhyar writes, Pluto can be said, in one sense at least, to symbolize the seed falling into the humus made of the dissolved and chemicalized remains of the ending cycle of annual vegetation, the product of a Neptunian process of dissolution. It can be related also to the descent to hell by Christ before his resurrection. Psychedelic. As Pluto therefore cuts into Neptune's orbit, a process of release from the past and of impregnation by a nucleated vision of the future can symbolically be said to occur. Indeed, such a period in every revolution of Pluto around the Sun is, historically speaking, unusually significant. These periods often witness a repolarization of the collective unconscious and the ideals of mankind along lines which, in one way or another, stress factors deeply rooted in human nature and thus common to a large section of mankind. It's very interesting to think about. And even the planet since 1999 has been doing a lot of changes. And even there's something to be said about individuals who are born around this particular time that's being spoken of, including myself and all the people, a lot of my friends around this generational area. Mark Edmund Jones has written that this historical phase of Pluto's cycle, quote, marks the overall and complete revolution of just about everything on the globe. Zipporah Dobbins further clarifies what she sees as the meaning of this period. This period seems to be re-emphasizing the Scorpio quality of the last quarter of this century. Pluto will be in its own sign, Scorpio, from the mid-1980s to the mid-1990s. Humanity is being notified that it is time that we learned to share the resources of the planet, Scorpio. The key meaning of letter 8 of our astrological alphabet, whether Pluto, Scorpio, or the 8th house of a chart, is the need to learn self-knowledge through the mirror of close peers, and to learn self-mastery out of respect for the rights of others. This is all a deep lesson that occurred from mid-1980s to the mid-1990s for all those who were born with Pluto going through Scorpio. One of the most remarkable things about Pluto is that its meaning encompasses many opposite qualities. So that was a lot about this very astronomical stuff. I want to bring it down now to, there might be a little bit more of that sort of thing going on, but I think now Arroyo is bringing it more to what does Pluto mean to our individual experience. One of the more remarkable things about Pluto is that its meaning encompasses many opposite qualities, about which we shall speak in more detail shortly. But simply to study the planet from the astronomical viewpoint leads one inevitably to confront measurements that range from the most minute to the incomprehensibly vast. So this is still getting more astronomical stuff. I'm going to try to work it out. But, for example, Pluto is approximately of the 14th stellar magnitude which means that it is around 1/1600th as bright as the faintest star easily visible to the naked eye on a clear, moonless night. This minute level of brightness, together with its rather small size, are two factors that are quite deceptive, for the power represented by Pluto far surpasses its physical attributes. You know, we often look at Jupiter and say, ooh, it's so big and it's so fast, and its expression in our lives are like that. It's interesting that Pluto is so dark, so cold, so mysterious that we don't see it, at least not on the surface. It's not until you go through all the experiences that the central coil begins to unfold. It seems apparent that anything connected with Pluto, or the sign of Scorpio, or the 8th house for that matter, cannot accurately be judged from its appearance, nor can it be understood from mere observation of surface characteristics. Our conception of the vastness of our planetary system, and thus of the nature of human beings, has been greatly expanded by the discovery of Pluto. Astronomers used to think of our solar system as being 60 astronomical units in extent. Now they see it as a third again as large, or 80 astronomical units in overall diameter, and possibly larger, since it is known that the sun's gravitational field extends far beyond Pluto. The solar system is now considered to be of such dimensions that light, which travels in a vacuum at more than 186,000 miles per second, requires some 11 hours to go from one extremity of the planetary domain to the other. It has recently become clear to increasing numbers of astrologers that the potential expansion of consciousness which Pluto symbolizes in the individual chart is a perfect parallel to the expanded awareness of the vast scope of the solar system itself, which Pluto's discovery prompted. What am I, really? What is the fullest boundary of the conception of myself? Pluto, being the last planet, was part of the definition of the solar system as being bigger than we once anticipated. The same way that in ancient astrology only thought there was the 7 planets. They never had telescopes to register Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Pluto, the dawning of understanding Pluto through telescopes and astronomical inquiry, reflects the dawning of the deep ramparts of the unconscious being born in our understanding in modern times. Pluto operates at such a deep level and with such subtlety that research into the charts of famous people doesn't help us much to understand Pluto's significance. After all, we can't usually know what inner problems or profound experiences shaped these people's lives. Hence, the most important research with Pluto has to be done in relation to our own birth charts and those of close friends. Whether considered in relation to individual experience or collective phenomena, Pluto always symbolizes a form of extremely concentrated power. This power is so intensely concentrated that the physical shape or size of Plutonian phenomena, like the planet itself, is irrelevant. For example, the atomic bomb is usually considered to be a Plutonian source of power. The amount of energy released from one such bomb is overwhelming in comparison to the bomb's physical size. As mentioned above, the planet itself exhibits this characteristic, for, although smaller than the Earth, its influence affects life on Earth in a proportion far greater than its size would indicate. Plutonian power, therefore, is derived from a source that is beyond or within the physical form through which the power emanates. Beyond or within the physical form through which the power emanates. The great energy of Pluto comes from a source that is not at all obvious and which we might call transcendental. This is the reason that Plutonian energy always manifests in terms of opposites. For that which is truly transcendent can only be understood by ordinary consciousness in terms of opposites. The light and the dark, the joy and the suffering, the spectacular show followed by the inevitable backlash. For example, nuclear energy and large-scale use of chemical pesticides have been referred to also as Plutonian phenomena. Both are sources of great power. We have all seen the obvious results that these can accomplish. But both have also been used in such a way as to bring about the negative, destructive, blanketing, ignoring aspects of such forces. Radiation poisoning from nuclear, genetic damage, chemical poisoning of the soil, food, and water from pesticides. Pluto, therefore, symbolizes a kind of power which can be used creatively only when the user is sufficiently spiritually oriented. For spiritual evolution and in-depth healing are the only areas of experience wherein Pluto's forces can be utilized without a negative backlash. If you try to take Pluto's energy and viscerally use it creatively in the world without referring to some sort of internal holding, some sort of internal discipline, or at least an internal grasp on your neurological patterns, then the Pluto energy will express itself through the vessel that you are, and it will take you over. If you happen to be holding the bag for a Plutonian situation that is not conducive to you, you can get really stuck in it. You can get really banged around, waste energy, waste a whole lifetime being stuck under the limit of this thing that you just weren't able to see around. So, this has been the intro to this Pluto part of our astrology series today. Hope you guys have been enjoying that. I'm Dustin Cormier. For those watching live, stay tuned. I'm not even going to take a break. I'm just going to keep going. In our next video, we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to have a short video giving a framework for the